At Odds and Ends by Corndog_Patrol and For the Wolfie on AO3. Chapter 19 Fake Feelings. The cello was a mystery to Shouta, namely how it managed to sound Morse and elegant when Hizashi played, yet mimicked a dying cat whenever he put bow to string. Eri would have been upset if she'd heard him use that analogy, but it was too true to avoid. You really think I'll sound good by the ball? Apprehension dripped from Shota's voice. Why did Hizashi keep putting so much faith in him, even after finding out the truth? You'll do it, Hizashi said as he fixed up the positioning of Shota's wrists. We just need you good enough for the backing, since the focus will be on me and the violin anyways. His hand was warm, although Shouta did his best not to notice. If Overhaul knows who I am, then what is the point of trying to blend in? Shouta pulled the bow across the string. It started strong, but then his arm slipped, and the instrument yowled as if he'd stepped on a non-existing tail. He'd probably just going to have his guards try to stop me as soon as we stepped foot in there. I talked to Overhaul recently, when I was at Hizashi's party. That made Shota's chest hinch. The mere image of Hizashi standing beside the villain, talking to him, felt far too alien for Shota's liking, and something protective buzzed in his chest. What if the villain had tried to take Hizashi too? If he arrests you at the door, it'll cause a scene, and knowing his reputation, I'd imagine he'd do best to avoid that. I'd bet he'd want to wait until everyone's distracted by something other than us. Hizashi took Shota's hand again and helped him run it across the strings. With his help, the sound was Morse and elegant. If I see him, I don't know if I'll be able to control myself. Shouta pushed against the strings, letting the movement come from his elbow, and succeeded in creating a second, acceptable sound, this time without Hizashi's guidance. The blonde took a step back to watch him. I won't blame you if you do, but it'll give him a reason to take you away, and you'd lose your element of surprise you can get. The best outcome would be if you slipped off while the attention is focused away from you, but Hizashi looked thoughtful. Shouta guessed at his plan. After our performance, since you're the star, the focus will be on you, both during and after. When the show is done, the crowd are falling over you. I'll slip away. Hizashi nodded eagerly, his face aglow. Right, you'll be conspicuous enough that Overhaul can't have his guards take you away, but inconspicuous enough to slip away, unnoticed. It felt good to formulate a plan. It made his hopes for rescuing Eri felt higher. He tried to play some more notes, but his mind was more focused on his daughter than the sound. It wasn't until several notes later that he was distracted by Hizashi happily singing. You're getting it! Here, repeat after me. Hizashi picked up the violin and played a long note. It took a few tries for Shouta to match it, but he finally found the same sound until the blonde played another. They continued the musical version of Cat and Mouse for a time, until Shouta was able to repeat the note back with only one or two mistakes. Then he got distracted by the sight of Hizashi, who was smiling with enjoyment. Long blonde hair fell over his shoulders, and he held the instrument with such etiquette pose that Shouta found himself automatically studying it. There was something immaculately beautiful in the way he balanced the weight of the violin with his body, with his raised shoulder, all the way down to the careful yet trained position of his toes. You all right? Hizashi asked. His expression of slight concern dispelled the smile, and breaking Shouta from whatever hypnosis he'd fallen into. It took a few moments longer to realize Hizashi had been playing a note, and he still hadn't matched it. Shouta quickly fumbled with the bow across the string, dragging the inconspicuous memory for whatever sound the blonde had played. But when he played, his elbow slipped, and the sound was sharp howl. However, Hizashi only laughed at his failure. Don't overthink it, he said softly, and Shouta nearly went to match the note of Hizashi's voice with the strings. It'll come naturally. He wanted to continue the game of cat and mouse. It'd almost been fun, but they were interrupted by a knock on the door. Come in, Tensei. The door opened, and in wheeled the butler. There was slight hostility between Shouta and Tensei, but right now the butler didn't even acknowledge the other Slayer's existence. No, now he looked almost panicked as he looked at Hisashi. All Might is here. What? Hisashi looked stunned. Why is he here? He says he's here for dinner. Shouta almost knocked the cello to the ground. All Might is here. He'd recognize me, and remember my Slayer license was revoked. Hisashi looked between him and Tensei, and quickly said, Tell All Might that I'll be out soon. Take him to one of the lounge's rooms while I get ready, okay? Tensei swallowed. He said he was looking forward to meeting Shouta, and that he won't take any excuses you have prepared. Shouta shot Hisashi a glare, but Hisashi was still focused on Tensei as he said that. That's fine, we'll go tell him we'll be right there. The butler nodded and disappeared, leaving them alone again in the music room. All Might knows I'm here. He interviewed us after the vampire attack. It was kind of impossible not to mention her name while giving the details. Hisashi put down the violin and started pacing. I doubt he knows you're Eraserhead. As soon as he sees me, he will. Shouta rubbed at his bite mark on his neck. He doesn't know I'm an Aizawa, but he knows Eraserhead can't stand vampires, and we can't tell him about Eri. He's my dad, Hisashi complained. Why can't we just tell him the real reason you're here? I mean, you and All Might have a lot in common, like you both decided to take in an orphan who had no one else. He won't be able to help, so there's no reason of risking telling him. No way Overhaul would let him into the party, and I doubt he'll accept the fact that I lied to you. Tell him I'm sick. Why else would he care about a donor anyways? Hisashi sighed and scratched his temple. Look, Shouta, I like you. Shouta stared, shocked by this sudden confession. And I know you'll never like me back, and I'm fine with that, but All Might knows I like you, and he's hopeful? That's why he really wants to meet you. His face was scarlet. He thinks you might be a future son-in-law. Shouta looked at Hisashi. Really looked at him. He wanted to be angry at him for making such a brazen assumption, only he knew there had to have been a base for it. After all, before Shouta had learned of Hisashi's bloodline, he'd started to... What exactly? I know I shouldn't have, Hisashi continued quickly, blathering as he usually did when he was nervous. But you were exhausted, and I didn't want you to know he was my dad because it would have raised so many questions, but he thought I was being shy about introducing you because I liked you, and I kind of rolled with it because it was kind of the truth, and also because it was just easy, and I just sort of panicked. Then that's our cover. It was Hisashi's turn to stare at him. Huh? We pretend to be in love. Even Shota's cheeks were burning as he said it. He probably knows I lost my license, but doesn't know the real reason why. Say we met, fell in love, and you took me in after the fire. But he knows you're a donor. Hisashi turned away from him, probably to hide how much he was blushing. Shouta was thankful for that. His stomach swirled with butterflies just for suggesting it. We pretend we fell in love because humans and vampire relationships are He knows I'm a hybrid. We pretend we fell in love because humans and vampires' relationships are too taboo. He knows I'm a hybrid. Shouta quickly said. Eraserhead has a quirk, after all. Right. Well, isn't that even more taboo? He'd totally understand that, since he's a Hisashi cut himself off, paused, and then quickly said, A great dad! Wait. Was All Might a hybrid? Shouta didn't comment on it. So, we say I became a donor as a cover to date you. Exactly! Hisashi bustled himself with putting the instrument away properly so he could continue to keep his back to him. We just pretend to be two star-crossed lovers and he won't suspect a thing, although I still say you could just come clean and about Eri to him and he'll understand. Shouta didn't comment on that either. You think we'll fool him? Hizashi stilled, and in a quiet voice he said, "I won't be acting." His stomach flipped a little, but not for the reason he wanted to. Should have wanted to feel disgust about a vampire being in love with him, especially Hizashi and his barbaric bloodline, but instead, he felt guilty. Hizashi loved him, and that knowledge warmed him far more than it should have, but the vampire's voice sounded so pained that it made Shouta automatically reach out to him. He wanted to comfort him, but Shouta pulled his arm back, just as Hizashi turned around. "Hopefully that'll be enough to convince him. I promise he won't make us kiss or anything like that. The worst thing we might have to do is hold hands." "I never meant to toy with your feelings." Shouta blurted out, unable to stop himself. The guilt was too strong. "I just needed to save Hiri, no matter what." Hisashi returned to his side and pulled his arm on his shoulder. Even though Shouta hadn't been able to comfort him, there was nothing stopping Hisashi. "It's okay," he said softly. "I know. Save her." Shouta focused himself to place his hand over Hisashi's. There was a lot he wanted to say, but no words emerged. He just held his hand and tried to give and take whatever warmth was there. Hisashi loved him. He'd known that for a while, but the confession made it feel far too real. "Your last name is different," Shouta said, at last, as he pulled his hand away. He wanted to change the topic, and learn more about Hisashi was always the quickest way to do that. They stood together, but Hisashi stayed close to his side. "I took my mother's last name," he said softly as he guided him to the door. "I even changed the name of the house to reflect it. All Might changed all the documents, but there would have been a scandal if I'd taken his last name. After all, he's the best vampire slayer in the world, and I'm a vampire who's the son of a murderer." Hisashi was leading them towards Shota's upstairs bedroom, no doubt to find him a change of clothes. While Hisashi always looked handsome, Shouta hadn't bothered with his own appearance since the big reveal. They reached the door, and Hisashi hurried in, immediately pulling clothes from the wardrobe. Whether they were acting or not, it seemed Hisashi was still desperate for Shouta to make a good first impression on his adopted father. "The world of socials in cutthroat," Hisashi continued, as he assembled an outfit across the bedsheet. "I've had to distance myself from my biological father, or else they would have never welcomed me. And just look at me now. Thanks to the years of hard work, I'm now the most desired bachelor in high society." "And All Might would be okay if you, the most desired bachelor in high society, married a hybrid, vampire slayer, donor?" "Of course, he wants me to be happy." Hisashi grinned eagerly as he proudly waved towards the complete ensemble. "There you go. I'll head down and warm him up while you get ready. You know the plan?" Shouta nodded. "Pretend to be a happy couple? Desperate to stay together, despite the odds?" Hisashi offered him a thumbs up. "I'll go butter him up. Come down once you're ready." He left without any further warning, leaving Shouta to stare at an empty doorway, and then to stare at the chosen clothes. Shouta could do this. He slew vampires for so long, so how difficult could it be to convince someone you were dating their son? Maybe Shouta couldn't do this after all, but for Hisashi's sake, he was willing to try. Hisashi fixed up his clothes as best as he could on the way to the main lounge. His heart hammered so quickly he thought it'd beat out of his chest. He could hardly believe that he'd confessed to Shouta, and with such an anticlimactic. Perhaps a small, quiet part of him hoped Shouta would rise up from the chair and would profess his own feelings, but the hope was delusional. With any luck, Shouta could at least tolerate him enough to pretend they're in love. Hisashi took one last moment to brush himself down of any imaginary dust before he swung the door open and cheerfully called, "You are here!" Toshinori looked at him, a half-eaten stone hanging from his mouth. A wild smile broke out around the baked good, and the man practically spat it out so he could stand and spread his arms wide. A huff of smoke instigated as he swapped to his heroic form, and in a flash, he was in front of Hisashi, his arms already constructing him in a hug. "It is so good to see you, my boy," Toshinori bellowed as he swung him around. "Forgive me for my sudden inclusiveness, but I cannot wait a moment longer to meet this dashing lad you're so fond of. Is he here?" He paused, the prolong long enough to glance around excitedly. "He's just getting changed," Hizashi managed to say, his lungs still trapped in the vice of Toshinori's arms. The Slayer released him, and he exhaled, righting himself so he didn't collapse. "Shouta should be down soon, and when he does, we should have a long talk." "Certainly." Toshinori stood there, his hands on his hip and a wide grin on his mouth, as he stared at the door. A short, awkward silence passed, before Hizashi quickly said, "He'd probably be a while. He isn't the fastest dresser." "Oh!" Toshinori shifted to twiddle his thumbs. "Ah, does he know I'm your father yet? Should I hold this form all night?" Hizashi sighed, and placed his hand on Toshinori's arm. "He knows you're my adopted dad, and he knows about my real dad. Also, I'm sure you'll both be more comfortable if you're just yourself." "But isn't the father supposed to be intimidating when they first meet the boyfriend?" As he said it, Toshinori sat down and transformed back into his skeletal self, pulling out a small flimsy paper from his pocket. "In here it says to be firm yet understanding with your son, first bringing home a boyfriend. Does it still count if you brought them into your home? Should we go to my home and have the meeting there instead?" "Dad," Hisashi sighed, putting his hand on his hips for emphasis. "I told you to stop listening to that book 15 years ago. I'm not a teenager anymore. I'm 30. Just be yourself. I'm sure everything will be—" The door opened. Toshinori and Hisashi both turned as Shouta entered, and it took everything Hisashi had to not swoon right there. If Shouta kept looking this good whenever he pulled the slightest effort in his appearance, Hisashi was going to need a full supply of smell salts to prevent a fainting episode. However, a puff of smoke to Hisashi's side caught his attention. All Might had transformed back into his muscular form. At first, he was confused why, but then his father said a single name that justified the reaction. "Eraserhead." The two slayers stood and stared at each other for a time, their bodies never moving. Hisashi was the first one to break the silence. "Shouta, this is my adopted father, Toshinori. Dad, this is my boyfriend, Shouta." Shouta stepped inside, and to Hisashi's surprise, offered Toshinori his hand. "Nice to meet you again, All Might." The veterinarian slayer took the offered hand and shook it firmly, although expression was grim. "Eraserhead, I wasn't expecting to see you here." His cold blue eyes drifted between Shouta and Hisashi, before settling back to Shouta. "I'd heard you temporarily suspended after the fire." Shouta nodded. "I haven't returned for a re-evaluation. I've been quite busy." All Might returned the nod with his own. They were still shaking hands. "When did you and Hisashi meet?" "A few weeks ago," Shouta said, his answer vague. "It really helped me return to my senses." "I see." Their hands finally parted, but things felt tense and awkward in the spiraling room. "And you're a professional donor now?" Hisashi stepped forward and took Shota's arms. It was time to be convincing. This was the only way we could date without being looked down by everyone. If Shouta posed as a donor, then we'd be able to do everything as normal couples did, like going to balls together. It was logical, Shouta said, drawing attention back to him. "I'm a hybrid, after all, and Sashi is a member of the vampire elite." His knees went weak at the nickname. "Plus, my reputation as a vampire slayer also doesn't help my standing." "You know, I don't mind any of that stuff, darling," Hisashi said to Shouta, leaning in close. He made sure the pet name dripped with affection. "A vampire slayer is a noble profession, as I'm sure Toshinori would agree." "I see. There was some truth being kept from me when I was here to investigate the vampire attack," Toshinori said, his voice rough. "I hardly believe Eraserhead would stand back and let Tensei take down the two vampires single-handedly." "I didn't," Shouta said, his voice sounding strangely soft. "However, my license is currently revoked. I asked Tensei not to mention my involvement to avoid any potential issues. I'm thankful for his silence, but please don't blame him for lying to you. The blame is purely my own." Shota's heartbeat stayed calm, without a single inflection to hint at a lie. Hizashi had found what a great liar he was. Toshinori watched him carefully, and for a moment, Hizashi was worried, but then a grin broke out across the man's face. "You've chosen a good man, Hizashi," he said, his beam never revealing. "Eraserhead here is a great slayer, but he's also a real hero. Trust me, I've seen him in action. He's got a good heart beneath all that grumpy exterior." Shouta stiffened against him, but when Hizashi glanced at his face to make sure he was okay, he was surprised to see a hint of red dusting his cheeks. The fearsome vampire slayer was blushing at the kind of remark, and the sight of it was enough to make Hizashi smile with complete admiration. "Yeah," Hizashi agreed. "I know." Shouta had done everything to save his daughter. The fact that he'd gone to desperate lengths didn't mean Hizashi was a bad person. It made Shouta a dedicated father. He looked between the bite mark on Shota's neck, mostly hidden by the collar, and All Might's wrists, where he knew a mark was hidden beneath the sleeve. Both bites were from Hizashi's fangs, and both had been allowed because a vampire slayer had been trying to rescue an innocent child. Hizashi pressed closer to Shota's side, and for just a moment, pretended he really was introducing his boyfriend to his father. "I'm really a lucky guy." Okay, look, I'm gonna cry. For the Wolfie, I'm gonna cry. Okay. I love the whole fake relationship turn real relationship kind of thing deal. The whole, oh, we have to fake date. And oh no, we caught feelings, right? This is a little bit backwards. They caught feelings and then they fake date. And they're like, yep, this is fake. Except we know one of them isn't fake and I'm pretending it's fake even though I know it's real and I just don't want to accept my feelings. I'm talking to you, Shouta. But this hurts on another level. The whole, like, fake dating. Hisashi's like, yep, fake dating. Totally. Just wish it was real. And then Shouta like, fake dating. Do not think anything more of it. Do not think anything more of it. You do not have feelings. You do not have feelings. You do not have feelings. Focus on the mission. My heart hurts. My heart is in pain. My heart aches. It swivels with the pain. It is engulfed with the immense angst that is this goddamn chapter. Fake feelings, my ass. We both know both of the feelings are real. I'm gonna cry. Dude, what is up with For the Wolfie making me want to cry every goddamn chapter after chapter 15? I think it was chapter 15, but one of those two, but goddamn! Oh my god, For the Wolfie, you need to get your word privileges taken away. You have too much power. You have too much power. Too much power. Remember what was it Uncle Ben what Uncle Ben said from Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. And you have great power. So come with great responsibility. We need some fluff, okay? This is too much inks. Goddamn, I'm gonna cry. But yeah, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.